All right. How you doing, folks? Ron Raymond here from the Raymond Report, along with Keenan Allen, a.k.a. the Big Ragu from Big Ragu Sports. And I'd like to take a minute to welcome the Big Ragu to the Raymond Report. And this is a good friend of mine here in Ottawa. And I thought, you know what? We're always talking. And I said, we got to get your fantasy sports stuff on the air because you know a lot about fantasy sports. You've done well. And I think it's going to be a perfect fit here for the Raymond Report and our show at ATSStats.com. And I'd like to take this moment here to introduce the Big Ragu. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, Ronnie. How's it going, man? Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, no problem. I see you there. You're having a few pints or a few espressos there at the La Strada there and on Ottawa and Bank Street. So
just had myself a long espresso. Yeah, double,
Nice. So, yeah, hey, Chris, you know what? We've been talking about this for a long time. We said we got to get, you on the air here on our show. And we got to find a way to incorporate the sports betting angle and the DFS angle and have like some type of, we'll come up with some type of word here, a slang word for sports betting DFS type thing, because it's a perfect marriage when you think of it. I always tell, when I go to conference and I say, you know what, sports betting is like Coke, DFS is like Red Bull. And if you can just find that happy medium, because there's so much information in DFS and there's so much, it's so fast and with the mountains of information and, you're knowing players, but in sports betting, all you got to know is the team and the number. You got to know some things about the players and all that, but man, there's so much information in DFS. And, truth be told, I'm not a huge DFS player. I dabble in it, but, as a recreational guy, because I'm more, I hang my hat and I do my living as a sports handicapper. But let's, I thought, you know what, let's kick the tires here today and see, get some information going to NFL Week 11 and see if we can come up with some good information for the end users. And again, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you on Twitter and Instagram?
Yeah, so you could look up the Big Ragu Sports on Instagram and Twitter. I have my 2 accounts there.
Awesome. And we'll plug that in at the end of the show also. So folks, if you want to give the Big Ragu a follow on Twitter and Instagram, he'll be tweeting out some information. All right, Chris. So the way we're going to format this is we're going to go right into the Raymond Report. I'm going to do a screen share right here, and we'll get the game matchups on deck. This was the Thursday night matchup here. We had Arizona winning that one 26-25, the over-under at 52. So it did go under the total. Now, looking at this game here, you got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the New Orleans Saints. Now, looking at the line on this game, it's down to 3, and the over-under is at 49. The big news coming out this week is that Drew Brees is out, Taysom Hill is in. But you know what? Looking at, knowing Sean Payton, he's going to have special packages coming in and out of the lineup for Jameis Winston. And but now that there's a new head coaching change in Atlanta, the Falcons are starting to put some wins together. They got a 2-game win streak. But from a fantasy sports point of view, let's talk about some of your plays this week. If you were, and for the listeners who are watching, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna give out 2 core plays on each team, which Chris calls his sauce plays, and then we're gonna give a sleeper, which he calls his meatball play of the week, right? Or the meatball play.
That's correct. My meatball pick.
So, Chris, let's talk about your sauce plays here, your 2 core plays on each team here. We'll start off with Atlanta. Who do you like for Atlanta this week?
Granted, he's coming back from injury, but I think I hope that he's going to be picking up basically where he left off before he got injured was Calvin Ridley at $7,000. I mean, that's money to me that could be well spent because he can go off anytime, and he's proved it before the injury, and they're going to want to get him back in right away. So for Atlanta, I like the Calvin Ridley pick for this week for that team.
I like that pick. You know what? Because people, when they think of Atlanta, they think of Julio Jones, but Zacchaeus at 3,500 looks pretty good too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The thing is, when you get those the younger guys like himself, Blake, Gage, that's a big gamble. I mean, it's worth the money because you're not spending anything more than $4,000 on any of them. Yeah. And all you need from those kind of players is one play for 50 plus yards and a touchdown, and you've made you've earned your value right there.
Wow. Looking at New Orleans going into this week now, the thing is, if you take a Taysom Hill, okay, you're getting a good value at $4,800, but is it really a good core play to put into your ticket?
Well, I think the thing is that whenever there's that unknown,
Yeah.
right, people are going to take their shot at it, especially at his cost of 4,800 this week. I mean, it just you plug him in at quarterback, and we know what he could do. He could do so much just on the ground himself. You know, he could run for 2 touchdowns at 50 yards apiece and make up the points for the money you spend on him. But the thing is, you don't want to, everyone's probably going to be jumping on him. So you want to try to find something, another pick to go with against the grain. Right.
Right.
So I like, honestly, and this is because Taysom Hill has such a strong arm.
Mm-hmm.
I like Emmanuel Sanders this week at 4,900 for that kind of deep play.
Wow. Yeah. And you know what? Like Michael Thomas is, we don't know if he's in or out of the doghouse with Sean Payton and how much he's going to incorporate him into the offense. But it's always good to have a Michael Thomas on the, but there's something going on in New Orleans that with Michael Thomas, that obviously he doesn't look, he's not rocking the boat. He's being, a good team player and he's not bringing attention, but we know there's obviously something that's, like I always say, if it doesn't come out in the wash, comes out in the rinse. And we'll find out at the end of the year if he's still a Saint, if things are happy-go-lucky in New Orleans. Now,
yeah, I mean, like with Michael Thomas, yeah, he's at 7,300, I believe, 7,300 this week. Yeah. Normally that's a deal for a Michael Thomas.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, it's people are gonna maybe scale back a bit because there is no Drew Brees.
Okay.
And especially last week against San Francisco, I mean, all the receivers for New Orleans took a hit. They didn't produce well at all. But for Michael Thomas, 7 targets, and he had 2 catches for like 27 yards.
Okay.
So I think people are going to be a little bit hesitant, especially like you said, Ron. We don't know what's going on in the locker room either with the head coach and the offensive guys, right? So,
yeah.
On the upside,
yeah.
In past highlights, I've noticed that Hill does tend to go to Thomas. So, maybe it's not a bad thing to pick Thomas either at 7,300, where some people might stay away. I mean, that's right. At the end, you want to attack you want those players that are low owned, right? So,
right.
And that's what really gets you up into those top positions and try to win some money.
Here's from a sports betting angle, and this is what the show's all about. We're bringing sports betting into DFS. Look at the total in this game, 49.5. Normally a Falcons Saints game, this total will be in the mid 40s, 50s. Like it'd be like a 53, 54. And maybe, we stay away from the Saints this week a bit, unless you want to, Alvin Kamara, we know what he's all about. We know he'll get his touches and his points, but maybe there's better value on the board, right?
I think so. I mean, 9,200 this week, the running backs are really priced high. Guys like Kamara, guys like Cook. And, a lot of people are going to be all over Dalvin Cook this week, especially facing off with the Dallas Cowboys at home. 9,200 for Alvin Kamara. Again, the guy could go off for 40 points. I mean, he's done that. And he's not a running back like Cook that would take 20 to 30 carries in a game.
Yeah.
His production's basically on, out of the backfield targets,
swing passes,
swing passes, and then he'll break them for a big gains, right?
Yeah. The yak yards, right?
Exactly. And, but it's not every week, right? So you can find value elsewhere in your backfield if you need be.
Yeah, and he's coming off a good week, right? His last game against the 49ers. It was a 27-13 win. And, once Breeze got out, then Peyton had to go to the, old reliable, and Kamara had a pretty good game, actually.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, like 34.8 fantasy points. I mean, does he do it again? Maybe, like I said, that's the risk. I mean, for example, you take a guy like Kamara and you want to plug in Cook, there's $18,000 of your $55,000 salary cap. So if I'm not saying it's impossible, but you'll have to be creative on the other positions on your slate.
Okay. Your meatball pick this week, the sleeper pick. What do you in this game? Who'd be your meatball pick here?
Well, the sleeper pick for me, I guess, would be Taysom Hill.
Taysom Hill, eh?
Yeah.
At 48. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the next game here. Let's go Philadelphia against the Cleveland Browns. Now, looking at the totals at 47, the Browns a minus 2.5 now, 2.5 point favorite. I got a great angle, a sports betting angle on this game. The Philadelphia Eagles, when they're facing a non-conference opponent on the road, the over is 19-4-1 to the over. So if that happens, we might get a high-scoring game, and that means looking at this Philadelphia lineup, you got Mike Sanders, Boston Scott. He's the next Darren Sproles, right? This guy reminds me so much of Sproles. But who would be your sauce plays here on the Eagles?
Just for the Eagles, my sauce plays, obviously, Miles Sanders, always a go-to. And he came back from injury last week, and they've eased him in a little bit. They're easing him in slowly, and it showed because Boston Scott had himself a pretty good fantasy day as well. But yeah, Miles Sanders at 6,900, I think would be a great play because what's good is that he takes those. He's like a Kamara. He takes those receptions out of the backfield as well. So at the end, you want maximum volume, right? As far as when you're picking players on DFS.
Now, with Carson Wentz at 5,700, like we know Carson Wentz, his completion ratio is not that very high. But is he, from a betting angle, it's really tough to take the Eagles to on the side. But from a DFS angle, is Carson Wentz, like eventually he's got to have that one big game where no one's taking him, and then you can rack up some points with him, right? You would think, right?
You think so. I mean, they haven't been the greatest. I mean, he's so hot and cold.
Yeah.
And just looking at the weather there in Cleveland, I mean, it's raining, right? So, the passing game works in the rain, Ron. It's not always the most consistent.
No.
I would kind of stay away from receivers tomorrow. I mean, granted, keep an eye on the weather. If things dry up, then all right. We know Philadelphia's, they're going to throw the ball, right?
Yeah.
Then he's definitely a good value pick, but again, I would look at certain intangibles before plugging him in my lineup.
Yeah, so you're probably looking at running backs. If you're looking at the Eagles, you're leaning more towards taking a running back or maybe a tight end like Goddard.
Yeah, Dallas Goddard. He's always that safety valve for Wentz, right?
Right.
So he's definitely a good play, and I mean his value too. The one thing, Ron, I'm noticing this week, tight ends are really. You have a good, the most expensive is Mark Andrews at 4,900, and you don't see that a lot. I mean, granted, there's no Kelsey in the lineup, there's no Waller, so yeah, but I'm kind of surprised with the pricing this week. It's pretty low, so you can get your value at tight end for sure this week. And Goddard at $3,800.
Okay,
it's a nice plug and play.
Looking at Cleveland, you got Baker Mayfield at 5,400, Nick Chubb 7,000, Kareem Hunt 6,700. Man, and then you're looking ever since OBJ got injured a bit. Cleveland. Okay, looking at their last game, coming off a low 10-7 win against Houston. They lost to the Raiders the week before. To me, again, from a sports betting point of view, I'm looking at the total in this one. I think the over is a play, but if you do like Cleveland, who are the core guys you'd be looking at from a DFS point of view?
Well, 100%. You could even load both running backs in there. The way they're using them, and the values are pretty close. A $300 difference between the two. But when you look at last week, Ron, they both they came up with the same amount of points. You had Kareem Hunt come in with 19.2 fantasy points last week. He had 19 touches, 100 yards on the ground. 3 receptions out of the backfield. Then you got Nick Chubb. Same amount of carries, 19 carries, 126 yards and a touchdown with, he didn't catch anything out of the backfield.
Yeah, and you're coming out of an injury too.
Like you could plug both those guys in, you got value.
Yeah.
Because they're going 1-2 punch. And with no OBJ, that puts a little bit of pressure on Landry and those young receivers that Cleveland have.
Yeah, and Chubb's coming off that injury too, right? So we know
he didn't look too shabby last week. I'll tell you.
And the thing with athletes, once they have confidence that their injury is rehabilitated and they're stronger, they get more confidence. And but the thing that from a novice DFS guy like myself who only plays on weekends or baseball, looking at 7,000 and 6,700, there's no way you put both these guys on a card, do you?
You know what? You can. I mean, it's better than like I said, you could sit there and go Chubb with Cook or Chubb with or Hunt with Kamara, but you're getting value. You're saving. If you were to plug in a Kamara and Cook, there's $18,200 in salary cap. Where with these guys, you're at 13,700. So you got another $5,000 to play with them. Just under 5,000.
All right, and your sleeper, your meatball pick here.
The meatball pick. The meatball pick. I mean, with Philadelphia,
look at Desean Watson.
He can, you can love him or he'll break your heart. And it's Greg Ward. I like Ward at 4,000.
Yeah.
He's kind of that slot receiver that Wentz always tends to go to. Like last year, the last couple of years before this year, he had Aguilar. And Aguilar would come out with some games, every few weeks. Some great fantasy plays.
Oh yeah.
And Ward's one of them. I mean, yeah, that would be my meatball pick this week.
Okay, just looking at Ward's stats here on the season. 37 receptions, 282 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's let me see his targets, 51 targets. I don't know if that's this year.
Yeah, that's this year.
So he's targeted 5.5. I guess YPT, I guess that's yards per target.
Yes.
So hey, you know what? That's a pretty good meatball play, and you're paying what again?
4,000.
4,000. So
yeah.
And the one thing that I noticed with DFS, and we've talked about this many times, is it's a lot like sports betting, right? It's when there's a confidence level or a public perception versus reality, and people love to bet the favorites all the time, right? Instead of teams, they look at the favorite players that they're always betting, the guys who get all those points. And when you look at the winners, that's one thing I like to do is, if I'm playing, I look at what the leader has. And obviously there's guys that you probably haven't heard of, but it's finding that needle in the haystack that week that racks up the points, because, hey man, you got thousands, if not millions of people playing DFS, and how many identical cards must be out there on every given Sunday where we're thinking your card is unique, but you're probably like with, 50 guys on the same type of lineup, right?
Well, I think, I mean, when it comes to the Sunday slates and you got 11 games to pick from, that's a lot of players you can choose from. So compared to a showdown slate, like when you get the Sunday night game,
yep,
that's where you're going to have 200 people at the same guys, right? Yeah. And you're splitting the first prize, between 200 people. With the Sunday slate, a little bit easier, better chance of, winning the top prize alone. But what was I going to say with the DFS, Ron, and you're, I'm sure you're a stock market guy. That's how you got to treat DFS. In order to, have a bit of an edge, you got to keep track of those players that maybe are falling the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And, because at some point they're going to hit rock bottom and their only way is up.
Hey,
so it's just looking at that price that, for example, I'll give you one, T.Y. Hilton. He's not having a season at all like we know for him to have. But, down to 4,200. When would you see a T.Y. Hilton in the past at 4,200? The guy was always at 6,500 and up.
Yeah, buy low, sell high, right?
Right. So it's, those are, if you're a DFS player, and you want to have some kind of, you want to be different from the rest of the pack, that's how you got to look at it. You got to look at each player as a stock. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the way I look at sports betting. I look at sports betting in the same angle where value, the percentage play in cycles, and you got to find the value. Looking at the Detroit-Carolina game, now this game's been, all week. The line came out late, and looking at the latest line on this game is still, everywhere, it's off the board at some places. I got -1 and 46.5. That's because Teddy Bridgewater, nobody knows if he's going to play this weekend. You got PJ Walker as the backup, Will Grier, the former West Virginia Mountaineer quarterback, at 4,600. But you know what? I think this is from a sports betting. Like when I handicap this game, I stay. If you don't know, you don't touch. And that's, I think, would probably be the same mentality in DFS, unless if a McCaffrey was playing, then you go with a McCaffrey. But I don't see. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me. Is there any guys that you don't want to leave out this week from any of these teams?
Well, okay, we've coached football, Ron. We're on the offensive side of the ball, and we've been in those situations where our starting quarterback is out of the game. He's not playing. So what do we turn to? We always turn to our, workhorses.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't shut the door on a guy like Mike Davis, who's probably going to be carrying a bulk of the carries, or a little swing or flats out of the backfield. Another player, to keep an eye out for, and he's been doing well, is Samuel. He's like a gadget player. They use him everywhere, right? So, and yeah, he's done well, Ron. He's done very well, and his cost is only $4,700.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I'm surprised that it's not higher, but these prices come out early in the week. They're out by Monday, right? So
okay,
sometimes even Sunday evening. So yeah. Last week,
not a good week. 1.2 points last week.
That right, but look the week before. I mean,
17 points, 17. And you know what?
30-point game, man. It's and again, they had him out of the backfield. They were they had him everywhere.
Yeah, that's a great that's a great catch on you, because what I like to do is in sports betting, there's a rule of thumb I have, and my buddy Ross Benjamin taught me this. You want to play in a team that lost against the spread versus a team that won against the spread the following week, and maybe you use that same type of mentality with a player like Samuel this week, knowing he only had 1.2 points last week. Maybe he's a go-to this week against the Detroit.
Absolutely, and that's why, I like the Mike Davis pick. I like Samuel, and remember, Detroit's defense, their run defense is, I believe, last in the league. I mean, you look at the ranking here in regards to Detroit's defense against the run. I mean, 32nd. If you're picking Mike Davis, his shot.
And how do you
great matchup against this this Detroit front seven.
Yeah, and how do you ignore one of the top receivers in Robbie? What do you call him there? Anderson, yeah. Robbie.
Again, if Bridgewater's in, then I would probably look at guys like Anderson, DJ Moore.
He's ranked fifth in the league in yards, 772 yards.
Oh yeah, because he's that big play guy. You know what I mean? Where Moore's more of the I don't want to say
possession receiver type.
Receiver, yeah. Because he could break out too, but Robbie Anderson's known for those deep ball, big play kind of catches.
Yeah, but here's the question: who's going to get on the ball there?
Well, that's it. That's what I'm saying. So with Bridgewater, I mean, there's obviously, I think that the chances are leading to Bridgewater starting, because they went from, oh no, he's out, to yesterday where they were like, oh, he's going to be a true game time decision. I mean, in the past, you sit there and say, okay, well, if he was out on Wednesday, he's out. But now they're dropping this bombshell on us. It's like, all right, we got to keep your eye out on that. You know what I mean? If Bridgewater is going to play, it changes the whole dynamic of the offense.
Yeah. Me as a casual DFS guy, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to take any guys off these teams, it's probably a sleeper guy at a very low value. I'd probably have to look at the lineups. Is Marvin Jones or Marvin Hall? Stafford, he's listed as questionable. His thumb injury, but he's expected to play, and if he is, Galladay is it Galladay or Galloway? I can't remember.
Galladay.
Yeah, I always get those names mixed up. I think it's Joey Galloway all the time. That's why I keep calling him Galloway on with the reports with Ross, and he always corrected me. But if you get a deep threat like that, because watching Detroit play Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago, you take away the deep threat of Galladay, man, then it's all dink and dunk. For the Stafford, and he was just like a chicken with his head cut off, running all over the place against that number 4 ranked defense in Indianapolis that day. But meatball pick, what are you looking at a meatball pick?
I mean, for the value, I mean, you have to go with Mel Hall.
Really, eh?
Yeah, at $3,800, and you got to look at when Galladay's been out, Hall's been okay. I mean, you got Marvin Jones.
Yeah.
He's now the primary receiver, so defenses are going to be focused on him, right? With the double coverage, the safety sitting high. But Mel Hall, look what you look past what he did a few weeks back with Galladay out. Again, not a high targeted guy. I think the most he's seen was 7 targets, I believe, and that was back in week 8 against Indy. But he busted out 4 catches, 113 yards, and 18 fantasy points.
Well, I'm looking at Marvin Hall's stats here last week.
Sorry, Marvin Hall.
Against Washington, 12.1 and then 2.8 against. So a bit of a, against Indy, 11.3 points, 2.8, 12.1. So yeah, well, boy, but if it goes in those cycles that I keep talking about, maybe he's due for a low cycle here. But and this is why we love NFL, right? There's so many games to pick from. And speaking of this one here, Pittsburgh against Jacksonville. Going into this game, the Steelers a 10-point favorite, the over-under at 45.5. Man, Jacksonville gave Green Bay a good scare last week, 24-20, and but still 1-8 on the season. And this is a dangerous spot for the Steelers going into Jacksonville on a 9-game win streak. I'm wondering if they have the same mentality, or they probably learned their lesson 2 weeks ago when they went to Dallas and took Dallas lightly and needed everything to get that win. If you were to play any Pittsburgh guys, who would you be looking at this week?
I mean, if you're looking at the receiving core, all 3, they're top guys. I mean, anyone can break out between Juju, Claypool, and Deontay Johnson. I think this week for me, I like Juju. I think he's coming on board. He's looking like he's coming back from, he started the season pretty.
So we got Pittsburgh taking on Jacksonville, -10 again. Who are the players you're looking for Pittsburgh this week?
I mean, I'm liking Juju Smith. His cost is only 6,400, which is pretty good. And I mean, look at his production the last couple of weeks. He looks like he's back to his normal routine of targets and touchdowns. And I know it's tough because they have the 3 receivers to pick from, especially with the Canadian Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. But Juju's been, Ben's got his regular target in Juju the last few years, right? And it just looks like he's coming back, and I would stay on that Juju train.
Okay, so you're thinking Big Ben and Juju as a core right there?
Yeah, I would definitely do a skinny stack with them.
Okay, and what about Jacksonville?
Jacksonville, and this guy really helped my lineups last week was Keenan Cole, and he's still for some reason at 3,800. I mean, he's since Chenault's been injured, he's kind of taken that number 2 spot behind DJ Chark, right?
Okay.
So, but his numbers last week, he returned the punt for a touchdown against Green Bay, had 5 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown, ended up with 21.7 points in fantasy. And last week, I believe he was, what was his cost last week? 3,400.
Wow. So
I mean, guys like this, and he's only up to 38 this week. I would ride that train as well, especially at home. I mean, and that Jacksonville's not just going to lay down.
No, there's a pride factor, right? But it's Chenault's out this week. I'm seeing. It looks like hamstring. Probably pulled it running that touchdown.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, is it Chenault you're talking about?
No, I'm talking Keenan Cole.
Oh, Cole. Sorry.
I thought you said 3,800 because he's taken that number 2 spot over because of the Chenault injury.
Okay. Sorry. I thought you said Chenault. I've misunderstood there. All right. Let me take a look here. Cole, Keenan Cole last week, 10.7 points. Yeah. And that was a pretty good, he was on a little bad 2-game streak there. Not much points. Then he had 10.7 points last week, or am I reading this wrong?
No, he had 21.7 last week against the Packers. He'd returned a punt return for a kickoff return for a touchdown.
Okay.
And did score a touchdown from the slot position.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading. Okay, here we go. There, 21.7 there. I had to put in the DraftKings number. I had it on standard. All right. Yeah. So looking at this game, you're thinking Cole as a meatball or part of your core?
I would say I would keep as a meatball, because everyone's going to look at DJ Chark, right? Because he's the lead receiver.
Yeah.
But usually, again, with those lead receivers, they get a lot of the attention from defenses, right? So I'm going to stay on the Cole train.
Yeah, and from a sports betting angle, look at our forecast. We got 22-16, the over-under at 39, and the over-under on the game is 45. So a bit of a low-scoring game. And, yeah, you know what? This is another tight game here. I like the points here. If I'm playing this, and it's not part of my my selections this week, but I would play Jacksonville plus 10 here from a sports betting angle. All right, let's take a look at New England taking on Houston. Man, that was a crazy game in the wet weather last week. I didn't look at the fantasy points, but I'm assuming the defenses did pretty well, or was it more of the running game that collected all the points?
Yeah, well, on the New England side of it, yeah, definitely guys like Harris, guys like Burkhead did very well last week for New England. Yeah. And, it's no secret. It's not a pristine passing attack like it used to be in the past.
Yeah.
And, a guy like Cam Newton, for example, we know what he's about. He'll run the ball, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, at 6,200 for Cam, he's gonna be the only one touching the ball 100% of the time. So they will obviously they'll use the what's it called, the merry-go-round of running backs they have between Harris and Burkhead and White. I mean, White's more of a specialty guy where he's used more for pass catching out of the backfield. But now that Sony Michel's off the IR, it just thins out that whole backfield. It's kind of a crapshoot when coming to pick who you're going to roll with there. So for me, safe bet, if you're going to take anyone offensively there, stick with Cam, because when they get to the 5, chances are he's running it in.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing with a guy like Cam Newton is, we all know what Cam Newton can do. It's the situation he's in New England that really doesn't help him, because he, who wants to go in there after Tom Brady? Like he's got big shoes to fill. A lot of guys stayed out on the New England Patriots because of the COVID this year. Look at their record. That's not a 4-5 Bill Belichick type year. So he's really in a no-win situation. And is the Cam Newton against Seattle where he put 38 points on DraftKings, and he did very well a couple nights ago on Monday Night Football. He picked up 24 points. And then he pooped the bed against San Francisco. But which Cam Newton is really, or it's not even Cam Newton. You can't even put on him. Which New England Patriot team is going to come out this week? And to me, I look at that offense, and there's no identity right now. The Edelman's out. Every week's a crapshoot. And the thing with Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, you can't always rely on Auburn Cam. That's what I call him when he in the zone read, right? Because I'm sure Cam Newton's like, okay, I don't mind running, but don't make it 60% of the playbook.
Absolutely, but it is what it is. He was like that too in his last couple of years at Carolina, and that's the one thing, right? Like, we talk about what makes the Patriots the Patriots is Belichick uses their players to their top abilities, right? Yeah. At this point, if that's how they're going to move the ball with Cam on the ground, then that's how they're going to move the ball, and just maybe little dink and dunk plays to the receivers. I know it's probably tough not having Edelman in the lineup for him for those little crossers and those little quick outs and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, if that's the thing, if this merry-go-round of running backs, that's what makes it tough to pick. But the values are there. Like a guy like Rex Burkhead, I mean, he went off last week. $4,600 running back could get you 22 points.
Yeah.
I mean, if he gets you, 12 points, 13 points at 4,600, you've made your money back. You know what I mean? But you get 22 points, you had a great day.
Okay. Looking at Houston, Desean Watson not having obviously with the firing of O'Brien at the beginning of the year, it's tough. And then you're hearing rumblings that people are not happy. And Houston, 2-7 on the year. I like New England from a sports betting point of view this weekend. The Patriots coming off that big win over Baltimore could, normally there's a letdown factor, but you got to be really good to be having a letdown factor. And New England's just not that really good this season, but you still got to respect Belichick and a veteran quarterback like Newton. But going into this game, who are the players you'd be looking for on the Texans?
Well, with the Texans, and you know what, his numbers haven't been that bad this year, is Desean Watson. I mean, with the exception of last week in Cleveland and the winds were just flying around there, he still walked away with 14 points, but not worth, 14 points at 6,900, I believe he was last week. No, that's not a good payout date for a DFS player. But previous, I mean, like at Jacksonville, 24 points, 27 points in Green Bay, 35 at Tennessee. He's had a great season as far as DFS goes. And at 6,500 at home against New England, I know it's, New England's defense, they don't just lay down, but I really like Desean Watson as my core pick for Houston this week. And I also like Brandon Cooks. I feel like there's like a revenge factor here. Cooks against his old team there in New England.
Yeah, true. And
you know what? He's only 5,200, Ron.
Yeah, and it wasn't great weather last week in Cleveland either, right? So it wasn't ideal conditions in a 10-7 loss to the Browns. But I agree. And maybe a Fuller. Like Fuller's, obviously everybody's going to be thinking the same thing. But I don't know. Is Fuller a guy you would recommend or you'd be looking at this week?
I mean, Will Fuller's Will Fuller. I mean, at 6,200, it's a good value because he's going to get the targets. I just I get a little bit worried because he'll be up against McCourty. You know what I mean? And they'll that Patriot defense, they always tend to handle those number one receivers with the opposing teams.
Yeah. And your meatball play this week on these two teams?
My meatball play actually would be Randall Cobb in the slot at 3,600. Yeah. Because he's still, again, with running backs being so expensive this week, and some people have the strategies of 3 running backs, in their lineup. If you're looking to save some money elsewhere, if that's your strategy, Randall Cobb is definitely a good look at play. Again, at $3,600. If you can get 10 points off of him, you've made your money's worth there.
Okay. Tennessee taking on Baltimore. I got a great angle on the under in this game. When Baltimore's at home, the last 15 years against AFC South opponents, and they're a favorite, the under is 15-0 or 14-0 to the under. That is just an amazing stat. As a home favorite, the last 14 years versus an AFC South opponent, the under is 14-0. And but we're not surprised. You look back at the year 2000 years with Ray Lewis at defense, Ed Reed. Man, Baltimore's always had some good defense. But I wonder if there's any DFS value, going into this game here with obviously the Ravens defense is good. Tennessee not as good as it wants to be at ranked number. I think they're 17th in the league. The last time I looked. Let me take a look right here. I got Baltimore. Yeah, Tennessee at 17. Baltimore ranked number 1 against points against at 18.3. Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry, but he hasn't been really. I haven't checked his fantasy points the last couple of weeks, but he's not making the highlights as much as he was in the first couple of weeks of the season.
No, you're right, Ron. I mean, it's kind of scattered. It's he did have a great week 6 at where you think he pulled off something like 43 points or something like that versus Houston.
Yeah.
But that's Houston's defense. I mean, Houston doesn't have the strongest defense. Now it's a different case here with Baltimore, especially on the road to Baltimore. Baltimore's defense has played well this year. But Derrick Henry at $8,000. I believe there's better value out there at that position.
Especially against that defense, right?
Yeah, and especially if they got to play from behind, they're not throwing them the ball out of the backfield. They'll
No.
bring in somebody. I can't remember who the other running back is right now at the moment.
For which team?
For Tennessee, sorry. Usually, I believe it's Foreman or
Yeah.
McNichols that'll come in. But Henry's more of when they're up, control the clock, and just pound the ground.
Yeah.
But at $8,000 again, I think you can still find value elsewhere.
Yeah, so you do have McNichols, Foreman, Perry. Yeah, and I agree. To me, from a DFS point of view, I don't know, especially with that trend going to the under. Maybe a meatball play here.
A meatball play if in order for Tennessee, this is if they're playing from behind. If you're looking at value, I really like Corey Davis.
Corey Davis, eh?
Yeah.
Let me see. Corey Davis, $4,800. Yeah, you know what? That's not too bad. AJ Brown's at 7,200. Let me see here. I'm looking. Mark Andrews, like you said, he's probably the most expensive tight end at 4,900.
He would be my core play for Baltimore, definitely. And I would tag him I would definitely hook him up with Lamar Jackson.
Okay. What about a guy like Tucker, like the kicker?
Well, so in showdowns you would allow to be, if for a showdown play, definitely Tucker's always good to go. He's been solid for them his whole career. So.
Yeah, and I noticed the showdowns, like the isolated games on Monday night, Sunday night. Obviously the showdowns more of the flavor everybody's playing, and that's what I was thinking. Maybe but I don't think this is that's a 1 o'clock game, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Cincinnati taking on Washington. Now, the football team here is a 2-point favorite. The over/under at 47. We got Cincinnati winning 23-19. Over/under at 43. The over/under is at 47. I love the Cincinnati kid here, Joe Burrow. Man, he's so cool. I just don't know if I like him a lot on the road against this Redskins defense, who aren't that really bad, right? Ranked 14th, giving up 24.
Ronnie, are you Richie Cunningham looking up to the Fonz right now? He's so cool.
Yeah. That's it. yeah. He's a Richie Cunningham, all right. He's more the Fonz. I'm Richie.
That's
Cunningham.
it. That's it. He is Fonz. Actually, you know what? Yeah, he's really cool. And the price is great at $5,500 still. Like, this kid's just sitting low, and his numbers this year for a rookie have been great. I mean, especially on the DFS aspect of things. Floor is usually around. His lowest game was last week at Pittsburgh. I think he had something like 12.5 points, fantasy points. But before that, his lowest floor was 17, where the ceiling was 38. I think when he played Cleveland at home. And for 5,500, I think you're definitely getting a value with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and you know what? And he's doing all this without Mixon. When you're missing a big piece of your puzzle in the backfield with Mixon, I don't know what his status is going into this the game this week. And let me check here on running back Mixon. He's still injured reserve, so it looks like he's still out for a while. Placed on injured reserve Saturday. So he hasn't played since when? Week 6 against Indianapolis. So there'll be no Mixon again this weekend. Looking at this lineup here for Cincinnati. So would you put Burrow in one of your stacks?
Absolutely, and I would stack him with Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd in the slot. He's been one of my favorite plays all year, actually. I try to stay away when he's a little bit like past 6.5 as far as the cost. But I mean, this week, I believe he's down to 5,600. I think that's a great value play. And I mean, with Burrow at 55, it still leaves you a lot of salary room to do a lot of things, So Higgins too, under 6,000. She's at 5,900. These guys, Ron, are between Boyd and Higgins, they're averaging about 9 to 10 targets each a game. Because Cincinnati's throwing it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And for the Washington football team, Alex Smith at 5,300 is hey, great story, right? The guy comes back, from his leg injury. There was an injury at the beginning of the year. He goes in there and he's done okay the last couple of games. But is he somebody you look here at 5,300?
You know what? Why not? I mean,
The value,
Cincinnati
right?
doesn't have the best secondary, Ron. You know what I mean? We know that, okay, they're going to watch, Terry McLaurin, obviously, because he's the threat there. But then you got, Alex Smith's numbers since coming back, the guy's thrown over 300 yards a game.
Wow.
I know it's like doesn't, and when you throw over 300 yards a game, you're getting bonus points.
No, you're right. 390 last week, 325
right?
year before the week before.
Yeah, he just needs to get his touchdown production up a little bit. But he's still, for 5,300, Ron, if you're getting 17, 19 points out of a guy like Alex Smith, again, usually 20, it's close there. 20 points on a $5,300 quarterback. You made your money. You spent your money well.
Yeah, I think Rusty likes it too.
Does he?
The underdog play of the week.
Well, we know who he's cheering for tomorrow, right?
Yeah, Rusty's a big hit here on the Raymond Report these days. Looking at the receivers, McLaurin 6,900, Sims 3,300, Inman 32. A lot of no-name receivers that are not not household names, right?
Right.
Maybe there's value here in some of these guys like Inman at 3,200, Sims at 33. What do you think?
Well, and I was going to say my meatball pick for this game would be Cam Sims, because when you look at his stats the last couple of games, again, on average 4 to 5 targets a game the last couple of weeks, but has potential to bust out. Versus the Giants, 3 catches, 110 yards. That's 17 points right there. At $3,300 player you get 17 points. You're already ahead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just takes one break, one slip of a DB and he's gone for 6, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, you could have a really good day. At 3,300 for me, Cam Sims is the meatball pick for this game.
Okay. Jets, Chargers. Now looking at the line, it's a minus 9.5, the over-under at 46.5. And you know what? You got a good young quarterback here in Herbert for the Chargers. Joe Flacco here for the New York Jets. You got old school against new school here. And, but the Chargers, not the luckiest team this year, a 3-game losing streak straight up and against the spread, but the last 6 games has gone over the total. So that means there've been a lot of high scoring games involving Charger games, coming off that 29-21 loss last week to Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. Going into this one here, back home, is the Chargers worth a look here back home? And I'm looking at the price here on Justin Herbert, $6,800. That looks pretty good when you think about it.
Yeah, for his value, 6,800 is definitely worth looking at. I wouldn't, again, close the door on a guy like that. He's been nothing but consistent. A surprise. I'm surprised they even started Tyrod Taylor this year at all. They should have just plugged this kid in right away. On average, his floor, 19 points, and I think his highest game was 41.5. I believe it was versus Jacksonville. Everything else is mid-20s. The kid's been producing, and he's always good. He's always good to plug in, and still, even at 6,800, again, I wouldn't hesitate putting him in my lineup.
Yeah, and Keenan Allen, he's just steady. You look at his points the last couple of weeks, only 12 points last week, but week before 28, 21, 25. The guy's been consistent all week. Do you go back to, obviously against the Jets, Keenan Allen has to be in your lineup, right?
Absolutely. And I believe he's only 7,400. And he is Herbert's favorite target. When you look at the targets he's in double digits. With the exception of last week against Miami and that tough defense, I think he had something like 7 targets. But before that, 11, 12, 13, fantasy points in the 20s. Keenan Allen's the guy you'd want to stack him with.
Okay. Now, looking at the Jets, anybody in the Jets that you'd be looking at?
Unless Joe Flacco turns into Joe Namath again, like he did Monday night there against against I can't remember who they played there a couple of weeks ago.
New England.
Sorry, who? New England?
Yeah, New England, when they play on Monday night against the Patriots.
Yeah, do I see it happening here again? I don't know, but if they have to play from behind, I'd have to say my meatball pick for this game would have to be Mims.
Mims, eh?
for the Jets.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
And
only at
again, he's a
3,300.
$3,300 player.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Not a lot of options. Like, yeah, when you're talking about the 0-9 Jets, you're holding your breath anytime you take them, either betting or DFS, right? The players, because who's going to, your own 9, it means that, you're not producing, you're not getting, wins, but from a productive point of view from the offense, who are the guys that really, getting fantasy points here? Perriman, Mims, Berrios. Hogan was decent when he was with New England, but I don't think he's been that
yeah,
good.
he hasn't really gotten targets. Hogan's that guy, and I think we used to talk about him in New England. What I loved about Hogan, he's a coach's dream because he's on the field 98% of the time. Great run blocking receiver for a run team, but unfortunately, just with the time he was on the field, just did not see the targets to match that time, right? So
no points for blocking in DFS though, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. Maybe that's something I need to look into,
Yeah, you know what? You're right, because as a coach, and as this too, you get players that love to block, man. Those are the guys you want on your team.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. 100%. I don't
even
care
Hogs.
if you're catching 10 balls a game,
Yeah, even the Hogs, I'm sure they hate fantasy because they get no love on the DFS. The big boys in the trenches.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, as far as with the meatball pick, I like Denzel Mims, and I know with the handicapping's different, sports betting's different. With DFS, sometimes you go with these teams that, like you said, are 0-9. I mean, they're playing from behind. What are they going to do? They're going to throw. So you got to take advantage of those kind of situations, right? And that's where you kind of come back with a player like Mims. So if you're going to stack, Herbert with an Allen or Williams, come back with Mims, I think is safe. It's a safe bet. I mean, he's had last week, I believe he had 8 targets his way. So Flacco obviously has some kind of rapport with him.
Okay.
So yeah, for 3,300, Mims is a good meatball pick for me.
Right on. All right, Miami taking on Denver. Miami just keeps winning and covering the spread. From a sports betting point of view, they're one of the best teams in in that regards. They go into Denver now as a 4-point favorite. The over/under at 44.5. Looking at this game here, Tua Tagovailoa. Let me check out his stats from last week to see how he did. Man, you know what? We questioned the move at the beginning, right, for Flores, but he's starting to look like a genius right now. Only 14 points last week against the Chargers. It was surprising, but not really, because Miami's, they're in the sports betting world. I call them an opportunistic team because it seemed to be they always get the lucky bounces, the pick sixes, the special team play. Offensively, they just don't wow you, in that regards.
You're right, Ron, and it's funny you say that. You kind of set me up for a nice for one of my core picks, actually, and that's the Miami defense and special teams. I would definitely plug them in my lineup this week.
Oh, really?
And they're only really $3,400, so it's still within reason.
Yeah, and that's one thing you really consider, right? When you're doing your, I haven't really checked to see if there's a wide discrepancy in prices when it comes from the top defense to the lower defense. But is that a strategy you use when you're doing your lineup cards? The defense, from a 1 to 10 priority, how important is that in your lineup card?
Well, usually, I mean, not all the time where I'm going to go. I always try to look for value in all my picks. I mean, especially defense is one of them. So I always try to look at the lower half of the options. Okay. I like that 3,000 to 3,500 kind of window because it's not too expensive and it's not, I would get the value out of a team like Miami, especially the way they've been playing the last few weeks. Right. So, I mean, this week you're looking at a team like, for example, the Steelers this week, $4,600. Yeah, I mean, they could. I mean, they're playing Jacksonville. It's naturally, yeah. Okay, let's jump on the steel curtain. But again, there's value everywhere else in this defense this week with defenses, and for me, I really like the Dolphins, and especially against this matchup with Denver.
I wonder if, from a betting angle, it's one of the teams I always look at. If they're an underdog, I'm almost always taking them. But from a DFS point of view, I wonder if Miami's popular with the DFS players because they're not a big offensive juggernaut type of team. But again, the defense does, and they're a perfect example of what a team should look like from 3 units, right? Special teams, offense, and defense. But I just don't know if they, I'd be curious to see how many players in DFS take, you can see how percentage wise, how many people are taking players from certain teams. I wonder where Miami ranks in that aspect, where people are taking a lot of Miami Dolphin type players.
I think this year they probably, because in some situations they were even cheaper than the 3,400, right? And they did produce. I mean, let's look at against the Rams at home. They were only $2,400. They produced a 23-point game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I if I recall, Ron, I think you and Ross were on that week. What was the stat? A West Coast team playing Monday night on the road to play an Eastern team at 1 p.m. of all times, right?
Yeah, the Rams.
Yeah, the record, I guess it wasn't in favor for the Rams to win.
No.
And I mean that, Miami's defense shut them down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But looking at the Denver, Drew Lock, it's just he's just so inconsistent. Like, you look at his fantasy points: 11 points last week against Las Vegas, 33 against Atlanta, 20. It doesn't have a lot of high. Obviously a quarterback is one of the positions in DFS that scores a lot of points. And going against a Miami defense, I don't see Drew Lock being high on everybody's list on making sure they're on the ticket, or do you?
Well, I mean, he's listed as questionable. He's having, I believe, the rib issues. So I don't even know if he's going to be starting Sunday. But if he was, I mean, here's the thing, and I kind of look at when I'm picking players, like, this is when the season starts. I start looking up who are the offensive coordinators of these teams.
Yeah.
And the players on this roster, do they make sense to the guy's system? And Pat Shurmur, I'm a Giants fan. He was with us for 2 years. Dink and dunk, swings out of the backfield, stuff like that. And that didn't really pan out for the Giants, but same idea here. I mean, I don't know. Drew Lock, he did have a couple of good weeks. I believe it was at Atlanta. I think his season high, 33.2 fantasy points. The week before against the Chargers, 20 fantasy points, and and his salary's low fives. So you're getting your value there. Now, against a team like Miami with this defense, I don't know if he even plays, but for me, I'd steer clear of Drew Lock.
Yeah. What kind of weather we're going to get in Denver tomorrow, right?
Well, yeah, right now it's looking sunny and clear there. So, but here's the thing too, right? It's for these visiting teams, especially those players that haven't experienced Denver, you get the thin air up there, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. All right. So meatball pick here between the Dolphins and the Broncos.
I like Jakeem Grant for the Dolphins. The guy's just he's a rocket, man. Like, he's speedster. He has the potential to have that one big breakout play.
Okay. Dallas taking on Minnesota, man. Like, me and Ross talked about this a few weeks ago. We did a little exercise on teams that had 3 wins that would make the playoffs, and Minnesota was one of the teams we both agreed on. Man, they're starting to put things in gear on a 3-game win streak. They got a benefit of a good schedule coming down and playing the Cowboys as a 7-point home favorite. I really love, from a betting angle, I love the Vikings this week, -7, and they're coming off a tough win over Chicago, at Chicago, a good defense, a division game. And now you're facing a Dallas Cowboy team, and looking at the Cowboys, is Andy Dalton going to be back this week? I know they were talking about he was coming off a concussion protocol, so it looks like he might go this week. What do you like in this one?
Okay, so I mean, the obvious is there. Dalvin Cook, he's $9,000, but you know what you're going to get out of him. The guy's touching the ball at least 25 to 35 times this game. Okay, like he has in the past, and he's had a couple of outstanding weeks. I mean, 45 points one week, 51 the next. I mean, the obvious is there. So Dalvin Cook's definitely one of my core picks. If I had to pick another player on Minnesota, it would be Adam Thielen. I mean, Dallas's pass defense isn't the greatest, and guy like Gary Kubiak, he's going to take advantage of that, right? So, and then on the bring back, and this will be considered probably my meatball pick, Amari Cooper, and especially if Andy Dalton, if the red rifle comes back, Cooper at 5,600, definitely worth the value.
So Cooper, I got him at 5,400.
54, sorry.
Yeah, so
Misread
54.
that.
Gallup's at 37. You know
and
what?
Lamb is at 5,000, I believe.
Yeah, Lamb hasn't really, impressed me this year. Jefferson, I really love this Jefferson. I wonder what his price was about 3-4 weeks ago. Talk about a guy's stock going up, doing the gritty every time he scores. You see that, the gritty dance?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's, I just can't wait for him to score this so he can do the gritty dance. But he looked good last week, man.
Yeah, he did against the Bears. Yeah, especially on the road. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a guy. If I was, and I'm going to probably put him in one of my lineups this week. Jefferson most definitely is the guy I'm putting in.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, the value's there, 6,000, right?
Yeah. The only problem is everybody knows him now.
Well, that's it. I mean, everybody knew him after the Atlanta game, right? When he busted out for like 42 points, but then, he hit a slump, like 5 points, 9 points, So yeah, probably some people might, hesitate a little bit, right? To jump on him, again, probably most of the DFS community is going to be on Cook this week, but I'm sure in some rosters, though, they're going to pepper in Jefferson and Thielen. And I mean, that offense is great. They're really getting it together now.
Yeah. And there's a lot of weapons here you can put as sleepers. I'm just trying to see where a good value would be on both these teams. And it's tough. The thing is, and I'm sure it's the same thing in DFS. In sports betting, we're looking for value on teams that really, that perception versus reality, right? You want to go against public perception because there's more value on the underdog or the contrarian type play. But now Minnesota's, anytime they're on a hot streak, I got a feeling those players on those teams that are hot are going to be a bit overvalued. And, again, the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows these guys like Jefferson. He had his come out game, what you said, against Atlanta.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but a guy like Zeke, maybe he's struggling, right?
Yeah, and I mean the offensive line's been banged up for Dallas, and ever since Dak Prescott went down, Ron, it just all those receivers suffered, man. Like that suffered, and
big time.
Yeah, and it's so it should. Dak was on a roll, man. He was one of the top fantasy players that everyone was going after before the season started. In the draft rooms, they really, he was one of the highly touted quarterbacks this year.
Yeah.
And to go down with the injury he did, it really it threw through the Cowboys and the DFS community with their Cowboy players, for a loop. But you want to talk maybe a meatball pick, like a value pick, and he's kind of like a very quiet, as the old Notre Dame guy there, Kyle Rudolph, the tight end for Minnesota. He doesn't shine a lot, but there's that once in a while, he'll get that touchdown or two for you.
Yeah.
And the goal line, right?
Yeah. And Zeke, triple single points the last 3 games in fantasy points. So maybe, who knows, maybe a breakout game. You can't keep these type of athletes down for long because eventually they're going to have a big breakout game. And that's where, from a contrarian point of view and perception versus reality and value, people are probably going to say, you know what, Zeke is done, or he's not, not racking up points. Maybe this is the week you load up on Zeke.
You know what, Ron? That's a great point because when you look at his stats, he's still getting 19 to 20 carries a game.
Yeah.
I mean, not many running backs today. A lot of teams are being very careful, and you'll see that 1-2 punch, and they're averaging about 10 to 12 carries each, right? But Dak is still, even though he hasn't produced the last few weeks and they've been kind of like single digit numbers, he's still getting the volume. And yeah, you're right. Against the Minnesota defense, I mean, they are what they are, right? Like it's, this could be the big breakout, and it's 6,500 for Zeke. I like the way you're looking at it, Ron.
Yeah. And hopefully, again, you want to stay away from all those public players that everybody's on, and maybe Zeke's a good, one of your core guys this week. Green Bay taking on Indianapolis, the Colts. I got a great angle on both these teams here. Now the Colts are 1-point favorite. Looking at the latest lines on this game, let me see here. Indianapolis, where is it here? The Colts. Okay, here it is. Yeah, -1 now for Indy, 51.5. But LaFleur, ever since he's been at Green Bay, he is 8-0 straight up. Let me see here. I got these coming off a loss. He's 8-0 in the next game. Matt LaFleur is in the last 2 years as the head coach of Green Bay. So, he doesn't have back-to-back losses. So nice rebound here as a head coach for the Packers, but he's not the one throwing or catching the ball this week, and he's just leading the ship. And Aaron Rodgers up against Phillip Rivers of the Colts. What a great matchup we have here this weekend. And you got Frank Wright at home this year. He's 14-3 straight up as a home favorite the last 3 years. So, from a betting point of view, if you're going to play any of these games, take Indianapolis if you like Indy on the money line. But if you like the Colts, take the +1. And, I'm not going to touch this game because it's too close to call. But from a fantasy point of view, I don't know if I like Rivers, because the one thing with Rivers, if he gets pressure, he gets that ball out quickly. And, then you need the yak yards to really help with your the passing numbers. But, Aaron Rodgers, you're always going to get Aaron Rodgers' best effort. Maybe Aaron Rodgers, the guy you look for this week. I don't know. But against a very tough Indianapolis defense who's ranked 4th in the league. Maybe you pass on some of this.
Well, you know what? This is kind of a game I've been looking at where you can do some stacks and bring back stacks. You know what I mean? Like Rodgers is a great play. I believe his numbers versus Indy the last 3 games was it 718 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 2 picks versus Indianapolis in his last 3 meetings with them. And Devontae Adams, another guy who's I know he's been injured, but he is playing on Sunday. He'll be sorry, one sec.
Yeah, 8,600. And the thing is,
I mean, at $8,600, yeah, he's very highly priced. But definitely we know what to expect from him and the targets that he's going to get from Rodgers.
Yeah, and 8,600, and it's going to be good weather. You don't have to worry about any rain or snow in Indy, right?
That's right.
But then, we laugh, but it's something you got to consider because the last thing you want is, say a game a couple of weeks ago, Las Vegas and Cleveland. And it's that was a passing nightmare for both those teams.
Yeah, no, that's right, Ron.
On
the way back, I mean, you got your. It's tough because the receivers there, anybody could shine, right? Like from a Pascal to Johnson to one of the 2 tight ends, whether it's Ali Cox or Burton or Doyle. I mean, again, here's another crapshoot, right?
Pascal would be the guy I'd be going to 4,400.
Oh, the value at 44 is great, Ron. I mean, especially against this Green Bay secondary, and that's why I think it's one of those kind of games where you can do some stacks on both sides of the ball, on both sides of the team there, on both teams there.
And Green Bay's defense ranked 15th in the league, giving up 24.8 points against. A running back like Nyheim Hines, $5,200. He's worth a shot here too. Maybe that's an expensive meatball selection though, isn't it?
Kind of usually, yeah. So you want to look at, when I'm looking at a meatball pick, again, it's either a guy's stock who's gone really low because he's been, dormant, silent, but one guy I've kind of really always liked this year, especially with Indianapolis, and his values really stayed low, is Trey Burton. And this week, I know he's sharing duties with Ali Cox, but I always like his athleticism. They seem to be using him, not as so much of a gadget player, but sometimes they'll use him as a running back or, an H-back kind of player. At 3,100, if he gets you a touchdown with maybe a couple of catches, you get 10 points out of him, you definitely got your money's worth there. So I like Burton as my meatball pick this week with this game.
Yeah, tight end, I like it, especially with if Rivers likes to get that ball out quickly. That's a good selection. All right, Kansas City against the Raiders. Now, KC a 4-point favorite, the over-under at 52.5. Now, I don't know what the COVID situation is on the Chiefs. I know this line, this number went off the board yesterday. And look, it's still off the board at some places. 9.5 now for Kansas City. And I think this line, when it opened up, I'm going to take a look here real quickly. Kansas City -4 early in the week, and it went up to 9.5. So, man, Patrick Mahomes revenge factor. The only loss they got this year was against Oakland, Las Vegas. I keep calling them. Who
Pick your
doesn't?
city.
Yeah, Los Angeles, Oakland, the Raiders, the Raiders.
Raiders.
So you know what? Derek Carr having a good year, and a lot of credit needs to go to Gruden. Gruden taking his old school ways and adjusting and adapting to the today's game. He's done a pretty good job, 6-3 this year, but they're going to have their hands full against Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes this weekend.
Absolutely. And to go off what you're saying with Gruden, I mean, I know he's been back in the game now a couple of years, but before that, he said if he ever came back, he was going to simplify his offense, because when he was with the Buccaneers back in the early 2000s, he was known to have one of the most complicated offenses out there, especially when it came to the terminology, right? So yeah. I think he came back and simplified things, and it definitely has worked out with Derek Carr. I mean, the guy's his cost has been really low this year. I mean, I know we're looking now at a showdown game where the price, the cost of players are obviously almost double, but I know, like, on average in a regular Sunday slate, Carr's been a low 5,000 kind of quarterback, and definitely worth every penny.
Okay.
For this game particularly, I like these showdown games are tough, Ron. I mean, because now the pool of players shrunk.
Yeah.
And to be very different from everyone else, it's that one player, and
yeah, I'm not a big showdown guy. It's so tough, because there's so many combination of lineups that everybody else is going to be on. And to me, if you're going to play a showdown, you want to go in a pool where there's not a lot of players. I like those the games where there's only, you can have 3 maximum entries, because you get the ringers who come in and they put 50, 20, 50. I think it's the limit's 20 now, on some of these things, or who knows. But yeah, to me, these are tough things to do. If I do play a showdown, it's for, beer money or coffee money, and just have fun at it. But let's take a look at this one. If you were to play this game here, who'd be your 2 top plays in this game that you put as your core players?
Okay, Ron, sorry to interrupt in regards to, I just got the update. Drew Lock is confirmed to start for Denver this week. So just for the viewers, just so you know, if Drew Lock is who you're looking at. Okay. Who do I like? I mean, the captaincy spot, sometimes I sit there, I'm like, okay, when you got Kansas City and so many options at receiver, and what quarterback you're getting with Mahomes, the safe bet, Mahomes.
Yeah.
I put Mahomes at my captaincy spot, stack them with at least 2 receivers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell you whether it's Hill, Kelsey, Robinson, because anyone can go off, correct? Even Hardman. So I would, put him in my captaincy spot with 2 receivers in the flex spots.
Okay.
With Kansas City. Coming back now with the Raiders. I mean, Waller's a great pick to have in another flex spot coming back. Because he's definitely Carr's favorite target. He's a big target. One thing you want to do, again, these showdown slates are very tough, but don't get too creative. Stick with the core, like the showdown. Stick with your cores and look at, at the end, it's just what coagulation you have, like what combo you have.
Yeah.
It could be a kicker that might be your meatball pick, or
or defense,
a fourth receiver on the depth chart kind of thing that might bust out that one touchdown.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I would recommend when it comes to playing these showdown slates.
Yeah, he's been a pretty good addition. Now all of a sudden he's catching the ball where he's dropping the ball in Philly. Renfro's been solid. Yeah, it's tough. Like I said, these games here are really tough to pick because that one player. Everybody, how many guys you put on a is it 5 or 6 on
You got
a
6. So you get one
6?
captaincy spot, Ron. That
Yeah,
gives you a 1.5 times the points he scores, and then 5 regular flex spots.
yeah. So let's be honest. The first 4, 80% of the people are gonna have the same pick. It's that 20% that you got to change it up, and hopefully, my philosophy is this: when everybody goes one way, you try to go the other. But trying to pick that other player to go the other way is one of the toughest things to do.
Well, I'm going to give you my meatball pick in this one here, Ronnie. I really like Brian Edwards.
Okay.
Brian Edwards, he's 1,200 on the slate, on a regular flex, and he doesn't get many targets. He's got, I think last week he got 1 target for like 16 yards, but he's getting he's definitely seeing the snap counts. So that just takes that one opportunity, right? That one play, and
no, it's a good play. $1,800. That's what I'm talking about. That one guy that nobody's probably taken, and his percentage of people taking him is what, maybe 6%, maybe.
Yeah,
10%.
I mean, sometimes, like I said, like last week, and I was surprised by this, the Keenan Cole pick. I believe when I looked at it, it was something like 8%.
Wow.
Ownership, and I was just like, oh, good for me.
Yeah, no kidding. All right,
Yeah.
Chris. Let's take it now before we end the show here. Let's say we're doing a lineup card. What are your 2 top plays that you're going to put as your core play this week?
For the Sunday slate, for the 1:00 games, I really I like Mike Davis this week. Now that's whether Bridgewater plays or PJ Walker plays. Again, as a coach, you're always going to lean on that workhorse when you might not be so strong at the quarterback position. And even if Bridgewater's in, they use him just like they would use McCaffrey. I mean, they give him the same opportunity. He's no McCaffrey, but he's produced well this year when called upon. So I like Mike Davis, 6,800. I think is a good value. And you could still have the option of whether you want to pair him off with a Kamara, whether you want to pair him off with Cook, and still be able to put together a great lineup. My second core pick I like is Keenan Allen with the I was going to say San Diego Chargers, but the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah,
7,400, and he gets the targets from Herbert. So those I kind of like those 2 core plays for my slate this week.
Oh yeah, and your sleeper pick of the week, your meatball play of the week.
My meatball play of the week, I am going to go with Cam Sims.
Oh, really?
With the Washington football team.
I like that pick. That's a great pick.
3,300. I think you'll get your money's worth.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's for that type of money and value. Yeah, I think that's a great selection. I know I'm looking at this week. I'm looking at Kirk Cousins against that Dallas defense in the dome, and Jefferson. Jefferson had a big night against what do you call it? The last game against the Bears. Get him on turf now in the indoor setting. Let him go with his speed. And an LSU guy, he knows how to win. But Kirk Cousins and Jefferson this week, everybody's going to be on Thielen. When you think of the Vikings, and I like to go a little bit against the grain because I don't want to always be on the same guy everybody's going to pick. But those are 2 that I'm going to have on my slate this week. And for a sleeper pick this week, that's a tough one to call here. I wish the Bills were playing because I loved taking the Bills players this week. But I think I'm gonna ride your Sims play. I think that's a good one too. I really like that play. I'm gonna have to bring up. Let me see here. Do you have another sleeper play that you like?
Another sleeper play. I mean, just looking at the slate here. One sec, Ron. Sorry, I'm just trying to.
No, it's okay. Sorry, Burkhead. Burkhead would probably be another. 4,600 is not really a big sleeper play, but
I love that pick. Sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I got a feeling he's going to be the workhorse. for New England. I wouldn't call him my sleeper play, but he's probably a guy I'm going to include in my lineup this weekend.
But that's the thing, Ron. You can call him a sleeper play, especially when it comes to New England, because of that merry-go-round of running backs, right? Like I said, like it's a crapshoot. It's like going to the casino and just, here you go, you're money and pray to God, that he's the guy that's going to get the carries. I like that pick, Ron. I mean, he did well last week. So you think that New England sticks with what they're comfortable with in regards to their personnel, right?
Yeah.
For me, a sleeper pick this week and another one that I kind of had my eye on, and I know it's not going to be very popular, but like in Gus Edwards in Baltimore, if they're going to lean on the run,
yeah.
And I was just looking at, and they run a carousel of running backs as well between Ingram and Dobbins and Edwards. But Edwards seems to be getting a lot more carries than the other two. Again, not very productive. At 4,500, especially at home against Tennessee, if they get up on top, they're going to want to control the clock and get the hell out of there fast, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's going to probably, they would lean on Ingram because he's back from injury, but just look at the stats on Edwards.
Yeah. No, it's a good play. Like 2 weeks ago against Pittsburgh, he had 14 points, 10 against Indy. And then, the monsoon in New England that slowed down the running game for everybody.
Yeah.
Or the offense, maybe not the running game, but the offenses. But no, I like that play. That's a solid play. All right, buddy. Hey, you popped your cherry here on your DFS. Yeah. So no, good job. A lot of it's DFS it can be very dry when you're dealing with numbers and all that. But a lot of the people who are in DFS are right into numbers, spreadsheets, and stuff like that. And it's a good way to make some money, right? If you know what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing I like with DFS is, it's I mean, everything's a gamble, right? Whether it's sports betting or DFS, but I've been at it for the last 4 years, and what's good is that the chances to even break even or to even win a little bit of money, it's nice to see that highlighted green number in the top right corner of winning. You know what I mean? So I think chances, I mean, everything's got a risk, but I like the odds are better, I find, if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Hey, that was good. We'll again, hopefully we can do it every week. And this is the first time, so obviously we'll sit down after and review the format and maybe think of other things that we could add to incorporate it from a betting perspective. But no, good job, buddy. This was a lot of fun, and again, where people want to get or follow you on Twitter, what's your handle again?
It's the Big Ragu Sports, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram.
Instagram and Twitter. All right, folks. So if you want to follow Christian and the Big Ragu, he's two of the same right there, and he's having cannolis right now in espressos at La Strada there on Bank Street here in Ottawa. All right, boy. Hey, have yourself a great rest of your day, and as I always say, shop for value, play those percentages. We'll see you back shortly with another Raymond Report.